Imagine a country where millions of people are addicted to drugs, not because they chose to be, but because a foreign power deliberately sold it to them for profit. Imagine your government trying everything to stop it and failing. Imagine watching your nation's money leave the country every single day, heading to other lands. This is not a story from the movies. This is what really happened to China in the 1800s. But here is the surprising part. Less than 150 years later, China did something almost no country in the world has ever done. It completely stopped the drug trade. It fixed its economy, and it became one of the strongest nations on earth. How did they do it? What methods did they use? And what can we learn from this story today? This is the true history of how China defeated the opium crisis. To understand the problem, we must first go back in time. In the year 1800, China was not weak. China was not poor. In fact, China was one of the richest empires in the entire world. The Qing Dynasty controlled everything the world wanted. They made the finest silk. They grew the best tea. Their porcelain was beautiful and strong. Everyone in Europe wanted these things. English people, French people, Dutch people, they all wanted Chinese goods. But here is the problem. China did not want anything from Europe. The Chinese emperor looked at European products and thought they were cheap and worthless. So when English traders came to China with their goods, the Chinese did not want to buy them. This created a huge problem for England and Europe. They wanted Chinese goods very badly, but they had nothing China wanted to buy. So how do you trade with a country that does not want your products? The answer: you sell them something addictive. Britain had a solution. They grew opium in India, which was their colony at that time. Opium comes from a flower called the poppy. When you use opium, it makes you feel good at first, but then your body needs more and more of it. You become addicted. Soon you cannot stop using it, even if you want to. Britain knew this. The British East India Company, a large trading company, decided to ship opium to China illegally. They hid it. They smuggled it past Chinese officials. They sold it secretly to Chinese people. At first, it was not a big problem. But year after year, more and more opium came into China. More and more people tried it. More and more people became addicted. By the 1830s, something terrible was happening. Millions of Chinese people were now addicted to opium. They had good jobs before, but now they could not work. They spent all their money on opium. Families were destroyed. Government officials became corrupt. British traders paid the money to look the other way. Officials who were supposed to stop the opium trade were now helping it happen. Silver was leaving China. When Chinese people bought opium, they paid with silver coins. This silver went to British traders. The British shipped it back to England. Year after year, more and more silver left China. Think about this. Imagine if every day your country was losing gold. Every day, money left your country and never came back. Your people became sick. Your workers could not work. Your government officials were stealing. This was China in the 1800s. The Chinese government finally said no more. The emperor ordered his officials to stop the opium trade. He told them to burn the opium. He told them to arrest the traders. But Britain was angry. Britain wanted to keep selling opium. Britain was making too much money. So Britain started a war. This war was called the Opium War. It lasted from 1840 to 1842. China fought hard, but Britain had stronger weapons and better ships. China lost. When China lost the war, Britain got what they wanted. They gained the right to sell opium in China. Foreign traders got special rights. They could trade freely. They did not have to follow Chinese laws. This was a disaster for China. The opium flooding into the country became even worse. More people became addicted. More silver left China. The economy became weaker and weaker. For the next 100 years, China suffered. The number of addicted people grew to millions and millions. Some historians say that by 1900, there were between 10 and 15 million opium addicts in China. That is more people than the entire population of many countries today. Opium addiction destroyed Chinese society. Workers could not work. Addicted people had no energy. They could not grow crops. They could not build things. The entire economy slowed down because people were sick and addicted. The government could not collect taxes. People spent all their money on opium, so they had no money for taxes. The government could not pay for schools, roads, or armies. Corruption was everywhere. Warlords, local military leaders, found that opium was very profitable. They taxed the opium trade. They took money from it. Government officials did the same thing. They stopped trying to stop opium. Instead, they tried to control it and make money from it. The currency became worthless. As silver left China, The money system fell apart. Prices went up and up. Rich people became richer, but poor people had nothing. Foreign powers became stronger. While China became weaker, Britain, France, and other countries became richer and more powerful. They used their wealth to control more and more of China. This was more than just a drug problem. This was economic warfare. A foreign power was using addiction as a weapon to destroy another nation's economy. By the 1900s, Chinese leaders faced a terrible choice: stop the opium trade and lose a huge source of money. Keep the opium trade and watch the nation continue to collapse. Why was this such a difficult choice? Because the opium trade had become part of the economy. Warlords needed the money from opium to pay their armies. Government officials needed the money to pay for schools and roads. If they stopped the opium trade suddenly, where would this money come from? Some leaders tried to just reduce opium use. They made small rules. They tried to control who could sell it. But this did not work. As long as opium was available, people became addicted. Other leaders tried to ban it completely. But the black market, illegal dealers selling drugs secretly, was too strong. Addicted people would do anything to get opium. The illegal traders were too powerful. For decades, China had no good answer. The opium crisis continued. The nation continued to weaken. Then everything changed. In 1949, the Chinese Communist Party took control of China. They had a new leader named Mao Zedong. Their government was very different from what came before. This new government made a decision that shocked the world. They would completely eliminate the opium trade. Not reduce it, not control it. Eliminate it completely. This decision was radical. It was dangerous. Many people said it could not be done. But the new government was determined. They began their campaign in 1950. Here is what they did: public trials. The government held meetings where addicted people and opium dealers were brought in front of the community. The dealers were shown as criminals. The addicted people were shown as victims. This changed how people thought about opium. Mass treatment and rehabilitation. The government set up places where addicted people could get help. Workers went into communities and brought addicted people to these treatment centers. The government paid for the treatment. If you were addicted, you could get free help. Severe punishment for traffickers. Opium dealers were arrested. Those who sold large amounts faced execution. The government sent a clear message: if you sell opium, you will be punished severely. State control of everything. The government took control of all trade. No private person could be a trader anymore. The government controlled what was bought and sold. This meant the government could stop opium trade completely. Education campaigns. The government told people, over and over, that opium was bad. Schools taught children about the dangers. Workers talked to families. The message was everywhere: opium will destroy you. But here is something very important that most people do not understand. This was not just about stopping drugs. This was about stopping the money from leaving China. When the government stopped the opium trade, they had to solve another problem. Where would the money come from to replace the opium profit? The answer was simple but powerful. The government reorganized the entire economy. The government took control of farms. Instead of farmers growing opium to sell illegally, they grew food and crops that the nation needed. The government controlled factories. Instead of factories making nothing useful, they made things the country needed. The government controlled trade. Instead of silver leaving the country, the government kept the silver inside and used it for development. This was called a centralized economy. It meant the government decided what was produced, what was sold, and where the money went. Private traders could not make money from opium anymore because there was no private trade at all. In other words, the government did not just stop the drug. It stopped the entire system that made the drug profitable. The results were remarkable. By 1955, only 5 years after the campaign began, opium addiction had almost completely disappeared. Think about that. In 150 years, the British could not stop opium. Warlords could not stop it. But in just 5 years, a centralized government ended it. The black market collapsed. There was nothing to buy anymore. Opium simply disappeared from China. You could not find it, no matter how hard you tried. No criminal organization could make it profitable because the government had complete control. Addiction rates dropped by 99%. Millions of addicted people received treatment and recovered. By 1960, opium use was basically gone. The economy stabilized. Workers were healthier and more productive. Silver stopped flowing out of the country. The government could collect taxes again. The currency became stronger. Labor productivity increased. Without millions of addicted people, the workforce was strong. People could work. They could build. They could create. The government gained financial control. For the first time in over a century, the Chinese government controlled its own money. No foreign power could use opium to weaken China anymore. But we must be honest, this victory came at a cost. The methods used were very strict. The government watched people carefully. Private business was not allowed. People had very little freedom in their economic choices. The government decided almost everything. Some people say the methods were too harsh. Some people lost freedom. Some people were punished too severely. The government's power was almost total. However, from an economic point of view, the results were clear. China had stopped the economic bleeding. China had regained control of its own money. And here is something that came later. In the decades after the opium crisis ended, this centralized economy created the foundation for China's later growth. When China opened up to the world in the 1980s and 1990s, it was no longer a weak, addicted nation. It was a strong nation with a rebuilt economy and a strong government. Today, China is one of the largest economies in the world. This is not because of luck. This is partly because, more than 70 years ago, the government decided to eliminate opium completely, even though it was difficult and even though it required strict methods. The opium crisis in China teaches us something very important about the modern world. Drugs can destroy an economy. When millions of people are addicted, the entire economy suffers. The addicted people cannot work. Businesses fail. Governments lose money. The nation becomes weak. Addiction is a weapon of economic warfare. The British did not invade China with armies only. They invaded with addiction. They used opium to weaken the nation. They used addiction to extract money. This is economic warfare, destroying a nation's economy without armies. Economic warfare still happens today. Modern economic warfare uses different weapons: unfair trade deals, currency manipulation, debt traps, and sanctions. Countries try to weaken other countries economically, just like Britain did to China with opium. Control of money is power. When the Chinese government regained control of its money system, it regained power. When money left the country uncontrolled, the nation was weak. Sometimes difficult choices are necessary. The Chinese government had to make hard choices. The methods were strict. But the alternative, continuing to lose the nation to addiction and poverty, was worse. The story of China's opium crisis is not just history. It shows us something we need to understand about power, money, and nations. When a nation's capital, its money, flows out uncontrolled, that nation becomes weak. Whether the money leaves because of drugs, or unfair trade, or debt, or corruption, the result is the same. The nation cannot grow. The nation cannot build. The nation becomes dependent on other nations. China understood this lesson in 1949. They decided to control the flow of money. They decided to stop the addiction. They decided to rebuild. Today, we live in a world where money flows across borders faster than ever before. Economic power is as important as military power. Trade imbalances matter. Currency movements matter. Where your nation's wealth goes matters. The question China's story asks us is this: are we watching our nation's wealth leave, year after year, without understanding why? Are there modern forms of opium, addiction to cheap goods, addiction to quick profits, addiction to easy money, that are draining our nations? And if so, what will we do about it? History shows us that one nation found an answer. The question now is, will other nations learn from this history? History shows us that one nation found an answer. The question now is, will other nations learn from this history? History shows us that one nation found an answer. The question now is, will other nations learn from this history?